guys, this is Jeri Morgan, CEO of Code Blue Computing and founder of The Bomb, Bosses of Million Dollar Businesses. And I'm super excited for our guests we have on the show today. We have Miss Mia Voss, who is the owner of Mia on the Go. And for those of you in Denver, you probably know Miss Mia. She's pretty fabulous. And what I want to do is I want to introduce Mia and just have you tell us a little bit about your business and what you do, or multiple businesses if that's the case.
Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming.
This is fun because those of you out in the audience, Jeri and I met through a women's networking group, I'm going to say 8 years ago. So we both watched each other's businesses ebb and flow over the years. Absolutely. For sure. And I'm a Code Blue Computing customer. So then there's that.
Aww.
You guys keep me sane. So yes, I am Mia Voss. I'm here in Colorado as well. And I do have two businesses. I have Mia on the Go, which is a lifestyle and travel brand ambassadorship. So I do a lot of fun things with travel, as well as really promoting female buying power. Just super, super fun. The fact that women make 85%, if not more, of overall buying decisions.
Right.
I always say, if not more. And then I have another business that I've had for now 19 years, which is TMC Services. And that's a punch list management business where I go in and make a list of things that need to be fixed before a project is done. So, bossing a bunch of men around on a job site.
Right. That's good times, right? Now, so yes. Mia, tell me, how did you get involved in that original kind of construction-driven business? How did that kind of play out initially?
Sure. So there's a running theme in my now almost 55 years on this planet, and that is accidental entrepreneur, being an accidental entrepreneur, which is right. Kind of being when things go wrong. So for me, initially, I started in 2001 with as you asked, the inspection business. And that was because I was working with a bunch of architects, more as an office manager, and they kept asking for help because they knew I was really particular. Right. And type fast. They're like, hey, help us with these punch lists. Can you help? And so I learned how to read drawing sets, and they would take me on job sites, and it just kind of took off from there in 2001. But then in 2009, of course, things really went sideways for so many folks. And earlier than that, mine took a little bit longer, but then I had to reinvent again. So that was my second piece of the travel blogging.
Right. Now, so tell me, and that's one of the things, we've known each other for a long time. And one of the things that I find so interesting about you is even just within the time frame that I've known you, you've reinvented yourself a couple of different times in what seems like in completely different areas, or to me it seems wildly different from kind of what you were working on before.
Sure.
And have those typically been driven by interests that you have personally, or kind of holes that you see in the market where you're like, oh, this would be a good area for me to move into?
It's definitely a combination of that with the punch list inspection that just was, and it still is such a huge, interesting market of a lack of being able to see things clearly. Right. So having this outside set of eyes for folks, whether they can afford me or not, is always needed, because you just get at the end of that job. So that was seeing, and I really don't know many people that do this specifically. So it's been fun to really pinpoint an incredibly bizarre niche, right. or niche, and create that business. And then the other pieces were more willing to be curious. So with Crave, which was that women's networking group, that was a lovely transition for me, and also accidental, because at that point I'd been on construction sites for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I was super, super entrenched in this heavily male dominated world, more right. than usual. And then to move over into this arena of finding and nurturing female entrepreneurs, and seeing this whole different side to what women create in business. And then, eventually took both those pieces and turned that into what I call more of a unisex brand, because right. I do truly believe that there's a reason why we are at a about a 49% male female population. Even Mother Nature doesn't want either of us to get over on each other too much. So
Right.
I love the idea of storytelling as well. So even with the brand ambassadorship and the travel piece, it weaves in storytelling.
Right. So now tell me, kind of throughout, and this can be through any of the businesses up until this point, what are kind of three areas where you've struggled, or things that you've overcome, that kind of looking back, they might be things that would help other people?
Sure. I mean, always price setting is
Mhm.
a really it can be a painful thing, and it can especially be a painful thing for females, because just traditionally, at this point right now, even white women are paid 85 cents on the dollar, and then it just becomes a different number depending on where you're looking at in the world, and it's really tough to see that, and so. Learning your negotiation skills is incredibly important, and setting that number high. And I still struggle with that at times too. And I have to have a chat with myself. So I think always setting that bar high, and you have to do the uncomfortable
Mhm.
and ask for that money, and find out what your worth is. Right now, there's so much transparency in the world that you can, I think there's something called glass ceiling.
Mhm.
It's a
Oh,
website
absolutely.
you can look and see where that is. And so doing your homework, I'd say that encompasses almost all three of those. If you're asking for three things, and just knowing your worth and then asking for it and sticking with it is incredibly important.
Right. And what's really interesting about that is, throughout my career, I accidentally have worked primarily in male dominated fields. I worked
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing before we started, our company. And then of course IT is that way as well.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really interesting is, even when I had my corporate job, as you would talk to, as you would go through the interviewing process with men
Mm-hmm.
and women, it would be kind of, what does the position pay? Like, they didn't really feel comfortable kind of negotiating that piece. And, by
Sure.
and large, men did. And I think that kind of carries over as you start, businesses too, for whatever reason.
Sure.
It's kind of an uncomfortable, like money, for whatever reason. It's just kind of an
Yeah.
uncomfortable, topic for women in particular. So,
Definitely. And a piece that goes with that as well is setting the number, and then not over explaining,
right.
and being
What,
very, it's, we call it hard stop. I said what I said. It's one sentence, period, hard stop. And then you just kind
right.
of have to, and I remember this, I was negotiating a contract with the inspection business. This was years ago.
Mhm.
And I drove all the way up to Aspen. It was supposed to be this like solid, we're signing a contract thing. And when I got there, it was a show.
Right.
And it was not anything solid at all. And this guy was basically like, who are you? What are you doing here? And why are you asking for so much money?
Oh, geez.
Oh, it was rough. And, I basically said, because I know this is a value. And it was a very awkward, long silence at the end of it. And then a 5-hour ride home.
Uh-huh.
And it actually turned out well. And the great thing was, I also stuck with my guns and negotiated to get paid every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else lost a lot of money, but because I stuck with my guns about getting paid more frequently as well,
Mm-hmm.
because I was giving all my time, that boded well. But let me tell you, it was a very uncomfortable car ride home,
Right.
thinking I just tanked this whole $100,000 contract.
Right.
So,
And it's so interesting. And those are the things. And even with our business, I'll look
mhm.
at kind of where we were, and our skills, have not substantially changed. What we provided was,
Sure.
was always what it was right now. But in the beginning, kind of when I think about what we were charging, it's like, were we, were we nuts, and being much more comfortable with it now. And
Sure.
a lot of people, when you talk to them about what they charge, you almost hear a question mark behind it,
Right.
like when they
Right.
tell you, and
Like
it's
a
like,
up,
no.
like a uptick of, yeah. Is this a question or a statement?
Right, right, exactly. Right. Now, so Miss Mia, tell me, if you were talking to someone that's kind of in their business right now, and they're struggling whether to get to that 6-figure mark or that 7-figure mark, what are kind of some tips, or things that you would, advice that you would give to them if they're kind of feeling stuck in, in a certain place in their business?
Sure. I mean, the power of relationships is huge.
Right.
So the ability to, I learned this phrase a couple years ago, the ability to have a handle that people can carry you around.
Hmm.
And that is an easy way for me to explain exactly what it is that you do. So
Right.
Bill and Jeri have you have Code Blue Computing, and I give like a whole list. Like I even recommend you to that Colorado business badass group that we have.
Right.
And so it's very easy for me to explain to people what it is you do
Mhm.
and what value you bring. So if you've got that handle, if you know exactly what it is that I'm doing, hey, go follow Mia. She's going to Africa this year. If you want to learn more about this, or if you want to know what car to drive in really bad weather, this is what Mia does. So the
Mhm.
ability to really simplify and to easily explain to people what it is you do so they can recommend you
Right.
is huge. So not complicating it. And then I do also think having what I call a board of different boards. So I have boards of influencers. So other folks that have influence out there in the travel world or in the brand ambassadorship world,
Right.
and they're my A-listers.
Mhm.
So they share my information out and they trust what I ask them for help with.
Right.
I also have a board of advisors, the folks that I can go to and be like, is this a hot mess?
Right.
Am I a little harsh here? Or even talking about those negotiating skills. I mean, I
Right.
had a board of advisors a couple years ago. I had some company that was offering me just all this free stuff, but
Right.
they stood for something that was the absolute opposite of my brand, right? It would be like a vegetarian doing something for, a chicken wing company, right? And
Right.
I had to go to because it was so much money, and I had to go to my couple of my people on my board of advisors and say, y'all, I'm struggling with this. It was
Right.
like Jesus on the Mount kind of thing. And
Uh-huh.
so having these folks that I can go to that I also trust implicitly that I'm going to be able to ask them some, either delicate or private, share private things with them. So I think that's really important too for folks to have these people, these trusted boards around them. And it does help you spend more time focusing on your business because you've got these people you can rely on.
Right. Now, so tell me, as you're talking about the brand ambassador and the travel, kind of the travel blogging piece,
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit about how, how you got into that and kind of how that, that
how I
business works.
how I get all this crazy free stuff.
Right.
It's kind of what it is. It's so much work. And I started my brand of being more of a, I call it the cheerleader for the things that I love. And I really encourage folks to do that. Go leave reviews. And that's kind of how it started. Was I was doing all these interviews on my show back on Google Plus and
Right.
YouTube back in the day. And I built all these relationships. And then I
Mm-hmm.
realized, gosh, I really would like to travel, get out on the road. I was just about to turn 50, and I looked back at all these great relationships I had made,
Right.
these wineries in Italy, and all these relationships. And so I just started saying, okay, hey, I'm going to come out there and I'll share your information or tell your story, and
Right.
it gives you content from somebody else that's a trusted brand, that people trust. Like, okay, Mia's not just going to recommend something just to get the money.
Right.
And so that's how it started. Was just and this was I'm at my 5-year anniversary, and
Uh-huh.
now I usually have like one major sponsored trip a year. So last year was 2 weeks in Africa,
Okay.
and that was with a company called Hills of Africa that I absolutely love. And now they have content from somebody that I just was so excited. And gosh, I've been back 2 months, and we've done the blogs, they've been shared out, and so we just constantly share out
Right.
that information. So, and then with the car companies,
Mm-hmm.
they are looking for people to test drive their cars, usually media folks. So they have a whole fleet,
Right.
and myself, along with a group of other people of all different walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
we test the cars out. I get to use it for my volunteer work, which is fantastic.
Right.
So I've been able to weave all of this together, even with the travel blogging and the building inspection. It is they lending themselves to each other in some ways, because I work on hotels in the inspection business, and then I go stay in a lot of these hotels, and
Right.
sometimes I'll give them a little punch list, like, oof, you might want to fix that. So,
Right.
but yeah, there's a lot of bad press out there about influencers, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who ask for free things, or just ask a sense of entitlement just based on, well, I can share this out. And you really need to show value to people.
Right.
For sure.
Well, and I find that business in particular very interesting, just because I'm a little bit older, so it's just kind of, it's really funny because my kids are 8, and
Yeah.
and there's conversations we'll have about stuff now because they do. I mean, there's influencers that are kind of their age range, a little bit
my gosh, they're
older
making
on this YouTube stuff, and my daughter will ask me questions, and it just blows her mind that like we'll talk about it. I'm like, this was not a thing. Like when I was
no,
I didn't even have a computer, so it's very interesting how, these things, kind of came into our, came into existence, and, definitely changed the way we do business. But
it does. It's the,
right?
yeah, the slave is now the master in some ways of, what you and I grew up with were spokespeople and, paid actors and things like that. And I have a friend, he's a public speaker, and he uses that line. He's like, I'm not going to necessarily believe that Matthew McConaughey is really driving that Lincoln, but if I see Mia Voss driving, and I just have a new car we're driving this week, which is great with the snow, it's like, I know that she's going to give me the her honest opinion of it. So it really is a flip where the consumers are now the voice.
Right. Which is awesome. Now,
I think so too.
Tell me, if you were talking to someone and they were looking for kind of tips on creating a successful and a profitable business, because there's a lot of people that have business, but they're not necessarily profitable.
Sure.
What would be some things that you would tell those people, or what were some mistakes that you maybe made early on that could help?
Right. Well, we touched on a few of it before. Again, just getting that really solid plan of compensation,
Right.
and what it is you're going to charge, and making sure that you've got that value proposition lined up.
Right.
I think to also not be confusing in the market too. So make it really simple. Everybody gets. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, especially when it comes to like direct sales or the multi-level marketing thing. You just never know what somebody is. If they're coming up with new ideas all the time, like you really do need to get, I would say working with a branding person is really important. If you can afford it, to get somebody that can help you be very, very clear about what it is your business does and how much you're going to charge. But again, if you're switching gears on your direction, it is going to really confuse people. So get really clear on it. And, I do think social media is really important. So don't be afraid. You can make anything interesting. Some of the most fun live streams and social media accounts that I follow are super unlikely as far as, I follow a lot of inspectors, and I love following them on Instagram because they tell these stories. They'll show pictures of like, can you believe somebody put this in with duct tape? And so, you can really find this voice. And I think social media is an excellent way to connect with people and just put your content out there and then engage with people. So don't underestimate. I think people are tired right now from social media, but I think you can use it really effectively for your business. And then, I was thinking about this with, you've been talking about this story, with the city of Erie, right? It's the ultimate what not to do. You guys go follow Jeri's Talk Nerdy to Me live stream, because she's talked a lot about some of the one just yesterday about insurance. I got chills. Right. But I think that intuition is a huge piece for business. And I've talked about that, about using your intuition. So combining the information that you have along with intuition, I think, especially for females, we've got a wicked sense of intuition. In some ways we have to, because we've been prey in a sense, right? So we're not always dominant. So our intuition, check the elevator, check the back of your car. I think we can use that for business and just kick it hardcore. And so, like, for instance, if that person in Erie had used their intuition and questioned like, this doesn't make any sense. I think that is a huge piece for business that you can use immediately to be incredibly successful, because you're going to have intuition about who you're going to do business with, whether a new client is, if they're already red flagging it right off the bat, like use your intuition, walk away from that. Think about how much more time you have when you're not dealing with drama. That's my soapbox. That's my favorite one. for
Right.
business.
You know, and it's so funny that you bring that up, because that's one of, in our business, that's one of the things that has changed significantly as we've gone over time. Because when I think about like some of the worst decisions that we've made over the time, whether they were employees that we hired or customers that we brought in, I always knew, you know, like
You
when we
did.
go back, I'm like, I knew there was something not right when we talked to this person initially. Or
You did. Yeah.
didn't seem right. And, you know, and
Did.
for
Yeah.
whatever, you know, for whatever reason, from a hiring perspective, if you're like, oh my gosh, we're so busy, we just need somebody in,
Mm-hmm.
which is never a good kind of point to kind of
It's not.
start
Well,
bringing
and
in, right?
it is. And I think that there's this uptick in, you know, accentuate the positive and be super
Right.
positive. And sometimes that can actually be a little bit to detriment, because you're like, oh, I don't want to be alarmist. And so we're not talking about fear mongering necessarily, but being really, and I got to tell you, meditating is amazing for that, for business.
Right.
Things you don't think you'd hear,
Right.
but to get that grounded thing. And you're absolutely right. I think all of us listening to this can go, yep, I had this, you know, this sixth sense. And I think listening to that is a huge, huge piece, and listening to your employees.
Yeah.
I think as a leader, anybody who has employees and is showing themselves as a leader, that's the first thing you're going to do, is foster an environment where your employees know they can come to you and say, man, this doesn't seem right, as opposed to a dictatorship,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Right.
So,
And I think really some of our, you know, kind of best moves that we've made in our business, some of those ideas have, you know, have come from our staff, not necessarily, you know, from us. So really being open, you know,
yeah,
to creating that collaborative, you know, type of environment that, you know, it's good for them, absolutely, but
it
it's good for
is.
your business.
It is. And I know, I'm sure, you know, you with having kids, you know, you see how well your children respond to these positive environments. And it's the same thing. My brain literally works better
Mm-hmm.
when, and I don't know if it's oxytocin or some kind of tocin that gets, you know, like what you get when you get a hug, but
Right.
my brain works better around positive, receptive people.
Mm-hmm.
And that trust factor is huge too.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
All right, now Mia, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah.
today. I always enjoy when we get to talk, and you know, and I think we hit on some really interesting topics for other business owners as well. Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
tell us, you know, how folks might be able to get in touch with you if they wanted to talk with you more?
Sure. Well, Mia on the Go is my website. I am at Mia Voss on the Go on the socials. So grab your name, folks. grab your name on any platform that comes up, by the way, because you never know when it's going to take off. Just a little FYI. And then my building inspection business is TMC Services. So
Okay.
that's how
All
to
right.
reach me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mia, and thanks for
Thanks.
joining us for the bomb. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.